and take some time to learn about what the city's talking about doing on Richmond Beach Road, but also time for us to hear what some of your thoughts and concerns are on the project. It's really early in the project, and we'll talk about that a little bit more later. So it's timely to have this meeting to learn on what we learn from you, and hopefully you can learn from us. So I'd like to walk through a quick agenda for what we have tonight. So we're clicking things. Can we click to the next button? Next slide, please. Thank you. So, for the structure for tonight's meeting, we're going to have a presentation for about a half hour. We've gotten a lot of questions over time, and we would like to take some time to share information with everybody so that we all have that same information. From a staff perspective, it helps us then talk with folks. There is a frequently asked question handout that probably everybody has, but are around in the different tables, and we'd like you to get one of those. It kind of guides what we're talking about tonight. But also what's important is we've gotten so many questions on this. Usually you do these frequently asked question things, and they're like 2 pages long. This one has a lot of pages because they've been great questions, and it takes a little bit of time to answer them. But our format of tonight's presentation is also based around the questions that we've heard you ask. So we're not going to get up here and lecture you on this, that, or the other thing. We're going to try and take the question and answer them and get the story out for everybody. So you'll see that. There is a lot of content and detail in tonight's conversation, though we're not able to walk through them all in the presentation. So we'll go through the presentation, then we'll take a break for about another half hour or so, a little bit longer. Be able to answer and talk about what you heard, what you learned, or if you haven't seen the board, walk through that. In that time, you'll also find some cards with questions on them, and as you learn about it, and as you hear from us, and there's some other questions you have, or you're not quite sure they're getting answered, please fill out that card and put them in the basket. That's going to lead to the last part of the presentation, where we will go through all those chords and we'll kind of aggregate them into themes and come back and say, well, here's some questions we heard, and we can talk about the answers to those questions. So that way we can try to answer 20 people's question in one time out there. And then about 7:45, 7:30, we'll wrap up, close down, and we will retire out of here. Lastly, there's an exit survey we'd like you to take on the way out. It's kind of a one-question survey about if we answer your questions, and we'd like to get a sense of that from you. With that, I'd like to introduce Kendra Dindinsky, who is our city traffic engineer and has pulled together a lot of the information for us today and can explain in whatever level of detail we need to get to the traffic and the accident history behind what we're doing here tonight. So, Kendra.
All right.
Could you repeat your name, please?
Yeah. Kendra Dindinsky. Oh, that's loud. Okay. You all know it now. So one point of clarification, Randy said there's some FAQs. Those got snatched up pretty fast, so we may not have them. But if you look around at the boards here, our project website is listed. They are available there. So those of you that have smartphones can go ahead and pull them up there via PDF or when you get home. A lot of the same content is sort of provided or duplicated around the room. So hopefully we're able to get to all of your questions. All right, so we'll move into a couple of background slides, and then I'm going to show a short video. But to start with, for those who don't know already, the project is proposed to restripe Richmond Beach Road from 4 lanes to 2 lanes in each direction and a center turn lane. A lot of the intersections contain some of the same functionality as they do today, retaining some turn lanes like an 8, for example. So we would invite you to really take a hard look at some of the intersection designs that we've laid out, some of them which even provide travel time savings. The project is largely needed to improve the pedestrian, motorist, and bicyclist safety on the corridor. Over in this station here, we show the history of collisions on the corridor. And what we're proposing today really is a proven safety countermeasure as recommended by the federal government. we'll talk more a little bit about collision history after we finish up with a video. We are looking for your feedback, so today we really hope to hear what some of your preferences are for the design choices that we're proposing. So some variations on intersection design are shown in these tables, and we want to hear what you think about one option over another, or other concerns as well. So next slide. So how did we get here? There's a few things that set this in motion. The starting point is the 2011 Transportation Master Plan, which slated this corridor for bike lanes. But really the most important factor is safety. As I said, this strategy is a proven safety countermeasure. It's shown kind of across the board to improve safety. The collision history we have over here really shows where we have issues, and it's not just in a single stretch. It really spans the length of the corridor, and this is a really great way to address those issues. Where we are today is that Council has approved this plan and has adopted it, and we're looking now to get some feedback on how we refine that design. This project is really responsive to kind of where we're at today in the collisions on the corridor. So we're not going to take questions right now. We have clarification. Sure.
The council has approved the plan?
As part of our capital improvement project, yes.
So this is all kind of moot?
No, not at all. We have many elements of the design that are up for refinement, or that we can talk about in terms of the choices. You'll see that there are multiple options and other alternatives for certain locations.
This is already being paid for.
So let's wait, because this sounds like a question that we'll answer at the end.
It's a statement, actually, because you've already said that this has already been approved.
The project in concept has been approved. The actual project itself, we are still working to define and design right now. So let's hold questions, and I definitely can answer that at the end. But we want to give some context and provide people with some information before we make decisions moving forward. So I have a quick video to show, and it's actually a 14-minute video, but I've chunked it into a few pieces, so it's a little awkwardly strung together, but I'm trying to pull out some key elements that I think would be useful. The point is really to show that this has been implemented widespread across the country in many places. This example is from the state of New Jersey. The state itself put together this video. And so you'll see some of the benefits explained with kind of pictures and words that can do a little bit better job of illustrating some of the benefits of this type of reconfiguration. So we'll go ahead and launch into the first one here.
The idea of a road diet to us was absolutely insane, and in terms of the police department, we weren't interested at all.
Road diets are a roadway design solution that are being used across the country and in New Jersey to create safer, more efficient, and more accommodating roads. Because most road diets are installed on existing pavement within the right-of-way, they can be a low-cost way for a community to achieve many goals, including providing greater multimodal safety and mobility, traffic calming, and enhanced economic development.
Usually part of road diets because of the tremendous safety benefits. We found that a road diet can reduce crashes between 19 and 47%. And some studies show on some roadways it can reduce crashes by 70%.
We've done 5
improve safety in 3 ways. They reduce some very catastrophic crashes, such as T-bone crashes and head-on collisions. They provide more space on the roadway for vulnerable road users, such as pedestrians and people on bicycles. And they slightly slow down traffic. Because of the tremendous safety benefits of road diets, the Federal Highway Administration designated them as a proven safety countermeasure in 2012 and encouraged their use across the country.
The road diet
signals to the pedestrian crossing lanes, we bumped out the curbs and reduced the distances, put in countdown timers for pedestrians to be able to get across. You can see what you need to do without having to make 20 different decisions, regardless of whether you're a motorist or a pedestrian.
With traffic calming, you know, there's an appearance that the queuing is a lot longer, that traffic is waiting. And I basically defy anybody to tell me, listen, time it before, you know, we have the road diet and the traffic calming compared to what has happened since we have changed. In fact, with the traffic calming, it's the same. They're not waiting as long as they thought that they were going to wait.
The road in its previous configuration had 2 lanes in either directions, and the speeds were at times 40, 45 miles an hour in a residential area. We were very concerned about and had sort of the same fears of affecting that road negatively in terms of moving traffic, but we found very early on that the traffic moved very well and it became a much safer place for both bicycles and pedestrians.
Turns. When a vehicle is stopped to make a left turn, traffic can no longer flow in that lane and creates the possibility of rear-end collisions. Cars will weave to avoid stopped vehicles, which creates the possibility of sideswipe collisions. These situations create a more chaotic and unsafe environment. 4-lane roads also create issues for drivers desiring to enter the roadway. There are a lot more things that a driver has to consider, especially when making a left turn onto the road where you have to look for a gap over multiple lanes of traffic as opposed to just one. For bicyclists, the lack of a dedicated facility coupled with higher speed differentials in a chaotic roadway environment can create a very uncomfortable and unsafe condition. For pedestrians, crossing a 4-lane road is much more dangerous and challenging because there's more distance to cover at a signal. At unsignalized crossings, the pedestrian needs to identify a gap across 4 lanes of traffic, and there are multiple conflict points along the way. A road diet consisting of a single lane in each direction with a center turn lane creates a much more orderly environment for safe travel. Left-turning vehicles have a safe place to wait before making a turn, have only 1 lane to cross, and they're not impeding through traffic. This allows a steady flow of traffic in the travel lane and also eliminates the opportunities for weaving and crashes associated with a 4-lane configuration. The added benefit of making it safer and more efficient for automobiles is that it also provides safer and more efficient travel for emergency vehicles by providing better sight distance, less lanes to cross, and a center turn lane that can be used to avoid traffic stopped in through lanes. Because of that condition, many locations have reported their road diets as having a positive effect on EMS response.
This idea came up, and I'd have to explain to them what our concerns were for public safety and us. We really pride ourselves in our response time for calls for service. We tried to enforce or move towards any alternative that we could instead of going towards the road diet and traffic calming and pedestrian friendliness. We took the stance that we want to try and do this in terms of enforcement. And again, after, I would say 8, 9, 10 years, we decided that, listen, our enforcement's not working the way we hoped it did. And as the police chief, I don't want to stand in the way of progress. So as a last alternative, this came up and we decided that this is what we're going to do. So when the alternative is put out there, and we've tried everything that we absolutely could do, and it didn't work out, I can't stand in the way of that. Fast forward about a year, the changes have occurred, and we really haven't had a problem. You know, when we...
With the council and politicians in our town, the engineers, we just kept discussing it till we came up with something that we felt was workable. And really what gave us the confidence was it was just paint. We said, if it doesn't work, we'll scrape the paint off and start again.
I would absolutely look into the option of road diet in any community that has some of these older infrastructure facilities, whether it's a 4-lane road or otherwise. It really gives you an opportunity to revisit what that roadway or what that facility should mean to that community.
All right, so we'll pop over back to our presentation again. Understandably, the characteristics of our roadway is different from the ones that you saw in the video, but I want to stress the fact that this has been implemented in many, many, many places with topography challenges, with buses, with all kinds of various situations. and the results are the same. They indicate that this is definitely a safety improvement regardless. So let's keep that in mind when you're trying to make an apples-to-apples comparison, right? So getting into collision history now, this is really the main reason that we're here today to propose this project. The collision history shows that there are a pretty high number of collisions on this corridor, 2 that are classified as high accident locations, 20 injury collisions with 9 of them occurring over the last 3 years. So this is really what I want to point to as a really important factor. The societal cost of an injury collision is on the low end $100,000 each. And so when you consider the overall project cost, which is quite low, this project is really a benefit to us as a society too, given the burden of those injury collisions. Some of the contributing factors like speed and speed differential, so this is when there's a variation between speeds on the road, creates a really hard environment for drivers and pedestrians and bicyclists to navigate. It makes it hard to gauge, when you're trying to turn from a driveway or side street, how fast that driver is going, because you know that they could be going anywhere from 30 to 45 miles per hour on a pretty typical day. Sight distance limitations are obviously a consideration too for anybody that turns from a side street or a driveway. Think QFC, for example, where I frequent. This is an issue, right? So the bike lane provides a little extra space for people to kind of scoot forward and see a little bit better. So also, another way this is an improvement. So we'll go to the next slide. So we just talked a little bit about speeding and speed differential. So I wanted to show you this picture and just kind of what do you get as a sense of what does this invite? This wide open, vast stretch of concrete, right? It really feels like it invites people to drive faster, right? And that's what we're seeing, is that people are really driving pretty fast on this stretch of roadway. It also gives the message to pedestrians and bicyclists that they really aren't the priority there, right? That this space is carved out for cars, and you're the second priority. And it's worth noting that 50% of drivers, and this is data taken west of 8th, are going more than 35 miles per hour. And I'm sure a lot of you can attest to that. So going to the next slide. Some of the ways that this 3-lane configuration improves collision and improves safety. You saw in the video, less lanes is a simpler driver task. There's less conflict points and less things that you have to be focusing on, so it really simplifies that action. Sight distance to oncoming drivers is improved. You're not shielded by one driver in the one lane that prevents you from seeing the driver in the adjacent lane. The speed differential is lower because the prudent driver sets the speed. There's a reduction of the conflict points in general, both at crossing streets and along the roadway. We've received some comments that people are concerned about head-on collisions, but based on all the case studies we've seen throughout the country, there's been no data to substantiate that. So moving to the next slide. So we just talked about, again, it improves the sight distance. This is just showing kind of a diagram of the space that you get to pull forward a little bit further to see oncoming traffic, so really a benefit to the people that are on the side streets or driveways. And then I wanted to point out too that again, to kind of echo what was said in the video, this type of reconfiguration has been used on such a widespread basis that the federal government has actually approved it as a proven safety countermeasure, meaning that they have seen in case studies that it has had, on the very lowest end, a safety improvement of 19% or more. So we'll go to the next slide. So again, as we saw, the safety benefits to pedestrians are pretty clear. Less lanes, less reduced risk for pedestrians. It reduces the crossing length, so that's a benefit as well. Less time out in traffic, right? It allows the median space in some locations to be striped so that you can use it as a refuge to stagger your movement across the street. And I wanted to point out too that as you see here on the slide, most pedestrians are struck when they're trying to cross the street, not when they're walking along it. And so we've gotten a lot of comments about the sidewalk width and why can't we just widen the sidewalks for pedestrians? Well, there's a couple of reasons for that. One is that they're built right up to the right-of-way, so anything to widen sidewalks would really require acquiring additional right-of-way, which is not great for residents that live along the road, right? But also, it doesn't solve the problem of pedestrian collisions. The pedestrian collisions occur when people are trying to cross. Go to the next slide. So the diagram there to the left, and which was also kind of illustrated on the video, shows the multi-threat scenario where you step out in front of a stopped car thinking that they're going to let you pass, and the adjacent car doesn't see. This is an inherent safety problem of 4-lane roadways. The 3-lane roadway still has this to a degree, but it is much less of a risk, as people that are turning into the left turn lane are typically approaching at a slower speed and ready to stop to make their left turn. And as you see on this slide, the speed reduction is a major benefit, as well as the risk of fatality grows exponentially as that speed limit ticks up, or travel speed ticks up. Okay, next slide. Getting into the safety of bicyclists, pretty logical connection here that there's currently people biking in the lane, which is less safe than having their own dedicated space. The markings also provide more of an awareness for drivers that they should expect to see bicyclists, which is a benefit. And just yesterday, my staff came to me today and told me that he helped up a gentleman that had fallen off of his bike when he was trying to transition to the sidewalk because he didn't feel safe riding in the lane anymore. So we've had 3 bicycle injury collisions over the last 3 years. So, and our data really substantiates the fact that there are bicyclists using the corridor. So this is an important consideration as well. Next slide. So getting into what a lot of you care about maybe the most is the travel delays. So I know you can't see this. There are some stations throughout the meeting here that show the travel time delay here for the entire corridor. So thinking when you're traveling essentially east of Dayton to 23rd, it was our target study area for the travel times. We've measured that, we've run it through models, we've calibrated it in real life to make sure that we're capturing that as best we possibly can. In calculating some of those travel times, we have erred on the side of assuming the worst, and so what you'll see here is, I think, a 51-second delay is what we're anticipating during the peak hours. So that's between 4:45 and 5:30. We have not done the AM peak yet, and we will do that as part of our ongoing design refinement. But there's also some good information about travel time delays if you're not just traveling along the corridor, but you're traveling kind of on the side streets as well. And those are presented at these stations. They get into the intersection-specific level detail. And so you'll see kind of what your average delay might be when you're waiting to take a left turn onto or off of a street. And you'll see some options that are presented that might save you some time. So we'll want you to give us some feedback on what you might think of those. Go ahead and go to the next slide. So talking a little bit about the city's standard maximum acceptable delay. So this is, you may have heard the term level of service or the term concurrency. It's all kind of, it's describing the same thing. But effectively, the Washington State law requires jurisdictions to adopt a level of service standard. So in Shoreline, we've adopted this one that's shown on the screen, and that's also provided on a board over here. I know it's a lot of words, but what I want to point out is the fact that the city's project must meet this standard, and any new development that comes into Shoreline must also show that it can meet this standard. So this is how we kind of enforce the maximum level of delay that we're comfortable with as a city that your council has adopted. I would like to also say that level of service, so the level of services of the intersections range from A to F, right? And we've adopted D, which generally means an average wait of 35 to 55 seconds per vehicle. But I would want to point out that we shouldn't be striving for A because that is basically indicating that you've overbuilt your roadway. You've spent a lot of money to, make things wide and serve you right away. And maybe that's not always the best way to go about a design. So just keep that in mind. All right, so next slide. So I'm going to get into some of the kind of high-level concerns that we've heard about, and those are echoed throughout the room as well, so we'll talk about those in more detail at the stations. But we've heard a lot of rumblings and anxiety about point wells, obviously, and I want to just reflect back on that last slide that you saw. So in terms of the concurrency, the city is on the hook to enforce a level of service standard that's currently in place, and so any new development that comes into the city, whether or not we're permitting it, is required to meet that standard or to adjust in order to meet that standard. So if you're not aware, this Point Wells development that's proposed is at the very end of Richmond Beach Drive. Its only access currently in and out is via Richmond Beach Drive and this corridor. It's currently located and permitted by Snohomish County. The application has not been approved yet. It's currently in process. But I think what's notable here is that we have an existing safety problem, and any potential development that happens here at Point Wells is probably decades away. So we don't want to, hold our breath waiting for something that may or may not happen for the relative low cost of this improvement project. So if you're interested in this topic, there's more information displayed here at the room and staff available to talk to you about it. Next slide. All right, so we've heard a lot about concern about waiting behind stop buses, and so there's a couple of diagrams that kind of get at that issue. One that's located right over here, and another that allows you to drive with toy cars to see how that plays out in reality. So we have a couple of designs that move the lanes asymmetrically so that you have a full width bus pull-out space. We think this would be a pretty good option at intersections where, like 3rd or 8th, where you have the left turn lane occupied a lot of the time. When you think about stretches along the hill section, for example, where there's bus stops at 190th, infrequently buses stop there, and even less frequently that left turn lane space would be occupied because there's only single residences along that stretch. So something to keep in mind when thinking about the trade-offs of that asymmetrical version versus kind of the more standard version. Probably notable to point out too that there's only a maximum of 4 buses per hour at any time on the part of the corridor that we're going to be impacting. Metro buses, yeah. So we're only talking about metro buses here for the time being. But we would want to hear your feedback about the school buses as well. So keep that in mind when you're talking to staff at stations. So the other concern we've heard about, sorry, next slide, following slow-moving vehicles. So maybe some of you are aware that it's illegal for a slow-moving vehicle to hold up more than 5 cars. That's a consideration, and we have some regulatory authority in terms of working through a strategy with the asphalt plant. So that's something we can consider. But even beyond that, I want to keep in mind here that we have a backup plan. If what we are recommending really proves to not work well, or we're really seeing that more people are impacted than we were expecting, we have this plan that's shown here on the slide, as well as on these boards, that would allow for commercial truck buses to use the right lane to climb and wouldn't hold up that vehicle traffic. So this is something we want to hear from you on, but the number of tanker trucks that we see on the corridor each day are only about 5, and they're staggered. So the frequency of that occurring is pretty rare that you would run into that on a regular basis. And in fact, when we did our travel time studies, we weren't even able to capture that, especially during the peak hour. So it's something to keep in mind, and we're still working on capturing the actual travel speed of those tanker trucks, as well as we weren't able to actually see it in the field. And I'll mention too that I'm a resident of this neighborhood, and I haven't come across them very frequently either, so still just trying to work on gathering that data, and we'll be updating the website and our FAQs accordingly. All right, next slide. So a couple more slides left, and then we'll set you loose. Another concern being garbage pickup and delivery blockages. So I just want to point out, because there's been some discussion about it, that it is legal to go around the stopped vehicles. So you're not it's not legal to pass a moving vehicle, but if something is stopped and blocking a lane, it is possible to go around legally. And this is how every other 2-lane roadway functions, and 3-lane roadways as well. So the picture that you can see up here on the right is a garbage truck on 15th Avenue as an example. It's even slid off the curb quite a few feet, and you can see there's still quite a bit of room to negotiate or to navigate around that garbage truck with clear sight lines. So this is something we want you to consider as, you know, as that event occurs on the road, in this stretch of the hill in particular, it's looking like that's not going to be a very big impact, and given the fact that there's good sight lines and an infrequently occupied left turn lane, so just keep that in mind again. Not a lot of people turning from that left turn lane on the hill. That there will be plenty of space to navigate around. One thing to consider too is that the maneuver of having to check to your left and see that person that might be coming up on your side is, you know, maybe a more risky or more limited sight distance check than the straight on view in front of you to see that clear left turn lane. So just something to think about as you're talking through these issues at the stations. So next slide. So lastly, we've heard a lot about cut-through traffic. Based on our travel time studies, we don't think this is going to be a huge impact. However, we do want to hear from you where you think it might occur so that we can monitor it and take some steps to mitigate if needed. So we have a roll plot, or 3 roll plots really, throughout the room. And we want you to put dots on the streets that you think are going to receive that cut-through traffic so that we can go ahead and monitor that and make sure that we haven't caused that problem. So that's the end of the slides. Next, there's one more wrap-up slide, which is that we want to hear your feedback today. There's multiple design options and intersection choices. We really want to hear what you think might work better, hear some of the issues that you see along the corridor, put some post-it notes where you have trouble entering the roadway or where you think is a potential safety concern as a pedestrian, as a motorist. So we'll set you loose to give us your feedback. And as Randy noted, there's little cards at each station that have some space to write a question, or if you don't feel it was resolved through these boards, that we will come back and answer at the end of the session. So that is about it, and we'll set you loose and make sure you participate in that Q&A.